everyone. Welcome to a podcast from Tribe Terranova. I'm Steph from the Philippines.
I'm Helen from Kenya.
Today we're talking about something that sounds simple but becomes very difficult when we actually have to practice it. Emotional intelligence.
Yeah, especially when emotions are already high, when there's conflict, or when your good intentions are misunderstood.
Exactly. Because it is easy to say stay calm when you are not the one who is hurt, exhausted, frustrated, or being misunderstood.
Yeah, that's very true.
So today we are not going to discuss emotional intelligence only through definitions. We want to talk about what it looks like in real life, in leadership, teamwork, relationships, and even during the moments when we are struggling personally.
Yeah, so our theme today is when good intentions are misunderstood.
And maybe our first question should be, is emotional intelligence simply about staying calm?
Or is it about understanding what we feel and choosing what to do with those emotions?
Let's talk about it. Helen, when you hear the term emotional intelligence, what does it personally mean to you? Not from a textbook, but from your experience.
Uh, to me, emotional intelligence means being aware of my emotions without allowing them to control my action. It is understanding how I feel, recognizing how another person feels, and then choosing how to respond. That helps rather than harms the situation. I do not think emotional intelligence is about being perfect.
Yeah.
It's about being thoughtful in how we handle ourselves and other people.
I really like the phrase, a response that helps rather than harms, because sometimes our first response may be honest, but it may not be necessarily helpful.
Yes, honestly, yes, honesty is important, but how we communicate that honesty matters a lot.
For me, emotional intelligence is about maturity in how we receive and process situations. I
Hmm.
see it as having some control over the mind because our thoughts eventually influence our emotions and our emotions translate into actions. But it does not mean that we no longer feel angry, hurt, tired, or overwhelmed. We still feel all of these things. But instead of immediately reacting, we give ourselves time to understand what is happening inside us.
Oh, so it's not about removing the emotions.
Exactly. Um it is not about allowing the emotion to immediately drive the car.
Mhm. I like that.
The emotion can sit with us. It can tell us something is wrong, but it should not always be the one holding the steering wheel.
Oh, that's a good way to explain it. How emotions provide information, but they should also not make every decision for us.
Yeah. Emotional intelligence is not the absence of emotion. It is like
Yeah.
the ability to respond to emotion with awareness.
Steph, can you share an experience where you really had to manage your emotions?
One experience that taught me a lot happened after I gave birth almost, I don't know, 2 years ago. I believe I was experiencing some postpartum struggles at the time. Our babysitter had resigned and I was often alone with the baby. My husband helped as much as he could, but he also needed to work. So I became extremely overwhelmed. I was exhausted. I felt helpless and sometimes even hopeless. But at the same time, I knew that
Yeah.
I had children and a baby who needed me. Even when
Yeah,
I felt that I had nothing left to give, I still had to continue. It's like I have no choice.
yeah, that must have been very difficult, especially when you're also experiencing like physical recovery.
Yeah. And sometimes when you are a mother, people see you continuing with your responsibilities, but they do not always see what is happening internally. There was even a time when I isolated myself. I did not want to hear from the outside world. I just felt so overwhelmed by everything. But, I reached out to my church community and asked for prayers. I held on to my faith and trusted that I would eventually be okay. Then there was one small moment that now makes me laugh.
What happened exactly?
After crying, After crying and allowing myself to feel everything, I waited for the baby to sleep. So
Mhm.
when he slept, I took a bath, I fixed my hair, I put in some cheek tint and lip tint, and took a selfie.
I love that sometimes the chick tint helps.
It really does. It sounds funny and very simple. But you know what, Helen? That very small act meant something to me. I felt like I was telling myself, I am still here. Like, after isolating myself for some time, I posted that selfie. It became my quiet message to the world and maybe also to myself that I was back and becoming stronger.
I think that's a very powerful emotional recovery. I think that is powerful because emotional recovery does not always come through one major transformation. Sometimes it begins through one small action.
Exactly. Sometimes emotional intelligence is simply acknowledging, I am not okay right now. Then you ask for help, you cry, you pray, you rest, you take a bath, you fix your hair. It may not solve everything immediately, but it can be one step toward finding yourself again.
And asking for help is also a form of strength.
Yes, sometimes we think strength means handling everything alone, but I learned that recognizing when you need support is also emotional intelligence. Helen, you also shared an experience involving a group project. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, during a group project, I noticed some tasks were not being completed on time. So I wanted the project to succeed. So I reminded the team about our deadlines. But one member interpreted my reminder as criticism.
Mhm,
I felt so frustrated and disappointed because my intentions were not to attack
mhm.
anyone. I genuinely wanted to keep the group organized. My first instinct was to defend myself and explain what I was trying to help. Yeah.
Whoa, okay, that is such a common situation in teamwork. Sometimes you're thinking about the project, but sometimes there are really people that experiences it as something personal.
Yeah, exactly. But instead of responding like defensively, I listened to the person's concerns and explained my intentions
Mm,
calmly. We talked about the misunderstanding and eventually found a better way to communicate.
nice. But did that experience change the way you give reminders or feedback now?
Yes, yes, yes. It taught me that communication is just important as intention. We may have good intentions, but the way we deliver the message can still affect how it is received.
I strongly relate to that. I have also experienced having good intention misunderstood. I would rather not share all the details because I want to protect the person in the situation, but I knew that my decision came from a place of concern and responsibility. Still, it was interpreted differently.
Oh, how did you respond?
Yeah, I humbled myself and explained my side several times, even though I believe my intention was right. I also acknowledge that even when our intention is good, it is still possible for another person to feel offended or hurt. After I had communicated my side, I chose to remain professional and move forward. What gave me peace was knowing that I had tried to explain myself sincerely and respectfully.
Yeah, this is important because we cannot completely control how people interpret us.
Yeah, at some point, we have to accept that we can clarify our intention, but we cannot force another person to understand us exactly as we want them to.
And sometimes people do not advise immediately. They need to feel understood first.
Wow, that is one of the strongest points from your response. Can you explain that further?
Yeah. There was another time when I offered someone advice because I wanted to support them, but they thought I was judging their situation.
Mm,
I felt hurt and began questioning whether I should have said anything. But after reflecting, I realized that good intentions do not always guarantee a positive impact. Sometimes we quickly offer solutions because we want to help, but perhaps the person is not ready yet for an advice.
mm.
They may first need someone to listen to and acknowledge what they're going through.
That is so true. Sometimes we only listen long enough to prepare our answer.
Yeah, instead of listening to understand.
So perhaps emotional intelligence also requires us to ask, does this person need my advice right now? Or do they simply need my presence?
Exactly. When your intentions were misunderstood, were you able to consider what the other person might have been experiencing?
Eventually, yes. Looking back, I realized that the other person may have also been overwhelmed. Life had been testing him during that period, and perhaps I happened to be standing in the middle of the storms he was
Mhm.
already experiencing. But you know what, Helen? That does not mean that every reaction automatically becomes acceptable.
Yeah, understanding is not the same as excusing.
Exactly. That distinction is very important. Understanding where a behavior may come from does not mean we have to tolerate harmful or disrespectful behavior, but it helps us avoid interpreting everything as a personal attack. People sometimes respond not only to what is happening in front of them, but also to everything else they have been carrying.
Yeah, I had a similar realization. The other person may have been feeling overwhelmed or insecure. They may have feared being criticized or misunderstood themselves. Once I considered that perspective, it became easier to understand why they respond that way.
Yeah, I think this is where empathy becomes difficult. It is easy to empathize with someone who is kind to us, but can we still try to understand someone after their behavior has hurt us?
That's really challenge. That's the real challenge now.
Yeah, for me, emotional intelligence means learning to separate the person from the behavior. I can say that this behavior affected me and it was not acceptable, while also recognizing that the person may be going through something I cannot fully see.
Yes, we can address the behavior without reducing the whole person to that one moment.
Now, let us discuss something people often confuse emotional regulation and emotional suppression. Helen, what is the difference for you?
So for me, I feel like managing emotions means acknowledging what you feel and expressing it in a healthy and respectful way. Suppressing emotions, I mean, they pretending they do not exist or continuously pushing them down. When emotions are suppressed, they do not need necessarily to disappear. They may return later through resentment, withdrawal, anger, or emotional exhaustions.
Yeah, for me, um, managing emotions means recognizing that you are still the captain of your response. When you are sad, you do not deny the sadness. You acknowledge it. You try to trace its root and ask, what can be done about it? And when you are angry, you recognize that anger can consume you or damage relationships if you act immediately from it. So you validate the anger, but you also give yourself time to process it.
Yeah, because anger itself is not automatically wrong.
Yeah. The emotion is information. It may be telling you that a boundary was crossed, that something was unfair, or that you were
Yeah.
hurt. But what you do with that anger is another matter.
Yeah. Steph, do you think remaining silent is emotional intelligence?
Remaining silent. Not always. I do not believe that silence automatically makes someone mature. We are human beings. We have the right and sometimes the responsibility to express what is in our minds. For me, emotional intelligence means knowing like when to speak or how to speak, and when silence is temporarily the wiser response.
Yeah, I agree. There are moments when speaking up is necessary, especially when something important is supposed to be addressed.
Yeah, and silence can also become unhealthy when it is used to avoid every difficult conversation.
Yeah, and avoiding conflict is not always like peace. Sometimes the problem is simply being delayed.
That is powerful. Avoiding conflict is not always peace. Sometimes emotional intelligence means calmly entering a conversation that we would rather avoid.
Yeah, one thing that becomes clear from our conversation is that emotional intelligence is not about pretending that we are unaffected.
Yeah, it is about recognizing what we feel, like understanding where those emotions are coming from and choosing how we respond. But there is another important side of emotional intelligence that we have not fully discussed yet.
Yeah, like what happens when we need to balance empathy with leadership, accountability, and boundaries?
And what should we do when someone becomes disrespectful, refuses to communicate, or when rebuilding trust becomes difficult?
We will talk about this in the second conversation of this part.
So stay tuned for part two of When Good Intentions Are Misunderstood, where we discuss empathy, boundaries, conflict, and the difficult decisions leaders sometimes have to make.
Yeah, because emotional intelligence is not only about understanding emotions.
It is also about knowing what to do next. See
See
you
you in
in
part
part
two.
two.